welcome to Filthy Casuals, a podcast about video games, hosted by three very kind and extremely knowledgeable boys. Thank you for joining us. My name is Tommy Dasilo, and with me, once again, as always...
It's Ben Vanel here, Tommy. It's great to be here at the end of a very long year. 10 years.
At the beginning of a new decade.
Oh, yes.
It's 2020 currently. Happy New Year, everybody.
Happy fucking New Year, everyone.
Welcome to what we were describing before the show started as the Roaring Twenties.
Yes. Yes.
What's like a 20s thing to say? That Titanic thing is starting to become funny. It's been long enough.
Oh, okay. That Hitler's never going to amount to anything.
Who? Don't know who you're talking about.
He's the Chancellor of Germany, I believe.
Is he?
Yeah.
Is he? Yeah. It depends. If it's 1920.
He just would have come off a successful campaign in World War I as a spy.
Love that Empire State Building. Maybe.
What did you do for New Year's Eve, Adam?
I believe. Well, I think I was working early New Year's Day.
Oh, okay.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Well, you currently are working early New Year's Day? For some of our listeners, maybe?
Or maybe that was like 4 days ago. I don't know what the date. I believe it is currently the 2nd of January.
Oh, okay.
Right.
So you worked yesterday morning.
Yeah. So I threw up at work.
Yeah. Yeah, this is how it would sound if we actually were recording 2 days after New Year. Like,
Yeah.
we would be either completely out of it or...
I got a party hat on.
Yep.
Oh,
Not on my head, though. That's why you can't see it.
Right.
You still wearing those glasses that you have?
2007.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess you could get 2020 glasses, but you just would have to have eyes that are spaced very far apart
Sure.
to see through the zeros.
They'd be lopsided glasses.
The two would be to one side, and
Yeah.
then there'd be a thin two in the middle.
Yes. Yeah.
a two that's significantly smaller than the two at the start.
Yes.
I'm
It's
willing to-
acting as the bridge between the two.
Exactly.
Yeah.
By the time people are listening to this, I'm willing to bet a number of people saw some
Yes.
like 48 hours ago.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, right. And they're like, why are they speculating wildly about what these glasses would look like
Yeah.
when we all
Yes.
saw dozens of them
Yeah.
a mere 2 nights ago?
It's crazy that it has been a decade.
Yeah.
That it is now the 20s as
Yeah.
of when we're talking.
Yes.
We're streaming this live. And like, yeah, so we're doing this best games of the decade thing, or like most significant stuff. Going back and looking up stuff for this and realizing how long 10 years is.
Yeah.
It's a long time. One of the largest groupings of years you have to deal with in your whole life.
Sure. And there's a name for it. Decade.
Decade.
Yeah.
It's long enough.
That must mean it's significant.
Yeah. A week, pretty long.
Sure.
2 weeks, that's a fortnight.
Yes.
You're not talking again until you come to a month. Wait until another fortnight has passed, then we'll think about another grouping.
I prefer PUBG, and that'll come up later in the show. But yeah, fuck, we've got a lot to talk about.
A lot of ground to cover.
We're going to do some games, we're going to do some trends and some stories, some topics from the decade.
This will be a two-parter. 2 sets of 5 years. A half decade.
Yeah.
A baker's decade, I believe they call it.
Yeah, this is like our Seinfeld where they go to LA.
Was that 2 parts?
That was
Yeah.
2 parts, baby.
Kramer,
Alright.
the smog strangler.
Yeah.
What did he get up to in LA?
Damn, that's very... He pops up on Murphy Brown in that episode, doesn't he?
Oh, sure. I
Yeah.
remember that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, good
They
thing.
saw him. The producer saw him at the Laugh Factory, and we're like, we got to get that guy on the show.
Before we get into the games, let's do a retrospective of Seinfeld.
Seinfeld through the decade of the 2010s.
Yeah.
What all the cast got up to.
Yeah.
Comedians in cars getting coffee.
Bit of Curb.
Curb.
Yep.
That sitcom
Kramer had
that
already
Elaine was
done
on.
that thing, hey.
What?
Before...
That was like 2006
Yeah, oh yes.
when he was yelling.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's not...
Veep,
Wow.
great show.
Still got to get around to it.
Oh, Cranston, the dentist.
Oh, yeah.
He
Yeah.
was doing Breaking Bad.
Yeah, Tim Watley. He went off.
Damn.
This is actually a good idea for a Patreon app.
Yeah.
The 2010s through the lens of Seinfeld.
What do you reckon the Seinfeld people will get up to in the 2020s?
Oh, that's a follow-up episode.
Yeah. All right, well, let's actually do that.
Let's literally do that. Because also, like, guest stars, like, we could find out what did Terry Hatcher get up to?
Yeah.
Desperate Housewives would have been still on during
Yeah.
the 2010s, I reckon. I reckon there would have been a season or
Really?
two.
Because
Okay.
Cougar Town was already happening.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Anyway,
That's a
we
reference to an episode which I don't know when it's come out. Or
No,
if it's-
we were pre-recording these so we can have like a little Christmas New Year's break, and it is fucking with my concept of time.
Yes.
Yeah, totally. Well, do we want to talk a little bit about what our criteria for this list was? Because we're saying
Yeah.
games of the decade, but should we clarify how we came up with this list?
Yeah.
Sure. Well, it's a combined list
Yep.
of all three of ours kind of weighted favorites and things we think are significant or like represent a trend.
Yeah, we tried not to double up too much on games that are like a similar genre unless they're particularly important.
Yeah.
So like we don't have GTA 5 in the list.
No.
But we have a similar game
We've
by
got a
the same
cousin.
company.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Our cousin was GTA 4, damn it. But that we have a 15 that we're going to go through over these two parts. And then like 5 things that cover trends that these games either don't really represent or are just so significant that they're like the 5 big defining things in video games terms of
Yeah.
the 2010s.
Yeah.
So like we're doing indie games as a topic and we get to talk about a bunch of indie games that didn't quite crack the games list.
Yeah.
Sort of, yeah.
Jeez,
It-
Ben's throwing out some huge spoilers
I
in this
know.
introduction.
Indie games will come up, everyone. You can delete this episode, I guess, because now you know.
I'm sorry.
That's it, right at the end of this part, too. Imagine if, like, when you were watching a TV show, it said, previously on this TV show, and then just showed you the ending of that episode.
Yeah, yeah.
That's
Or the-
what you just had.
Or the chapters list at the start of a book, but then it's just got little like, and he dies in this chapter.
Yeah. Just a book with an abstract at the start.
All right, well, should we get into it?
I guess so, yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe, like, just very quickly, like, what ages did we go through? I feel like ages is often a thing. Where did we start the 2010s at? Where were you in 2010?
Well, I'm 33 now.
Yes.
How old was I 10 years ago?
Now, is there some sort of trick you could use to figure this out quickly? Is there like a maths trick? So you're 23. You were what, 21?
21, 22.
21, 22. And I
Yeah.
would have been like 20.
Yeah.
So this is a formative period of our lives.
Mm.
These are the games that are going to flash past our eyes on our deathbeds.
This is the period of our lives, I guess, when we had the funds and the access and the ability to just kind of buy whatever game we wanted.
This is
Or
when
Not me.
video game companies traditionally are absolutely pushing all their marketing money into our demographic that we were in
Yeah.
during this decade
Right.
too.
Yeah.
We were 20-year-old males.
That's it.
That is the fucking sweet spot
Yeah.
for me.
I
in
mean,
terms-
everything was marketed to us in that decade.
Yeah,
Like, so what is it? What's that demo? 18 to 34?
something like that.
Yeah.
So this is probably going to be the peak of our video game lives.
Well, you
Right.
know what? But for me, I spend the start of this decade, I'm out.
Sure.
Right.
Like it takes me, I think the start, I guess around this point, I'm in a relationship with someone who's like very judgmental about video game playing
Right.
and a bit of a bummer, and to the point where I feel like, I guess I should probably just avoid
Right.
doing this because I feel very like shamed by this.
Right.
So, and also like, fun's being an issue. So yeah, probably the first 5 to 6 years
Wow.
of the decade, I don't really play much.
And
at
then you had a
all.
Wii U for the next 2. So
Exactly. Yeah.
you're coming in towards the back end of this decade.
I play the Uncharted games. I get some stuff on the Wii. I get like the Mario. But that's That's kind of pre the decade, isn't it?
Yeah.
Hey.
Yeah.
Yeah, I play Uncharted 3, and then I get a Wii U,
All right.
and that's kind of it for a little while.
Tommy's not going to be on this episode. But
I certainly didn't start the decade with any money. I was a uni student, but I had a PC and I had the capability to pirate games. That's
Right.
basically what I was doing. Like me and my dad were both gamers. Neither of us really had the income or the disposable income to just buy a bunch of games.
Right.
So we're like, well, how do we get these games? Maybe we'd get like Battlefield 1942 on a sale, and we'd share it, and we'd play LAN stuff. Or I was doing a lot of pirating PC games.
damn. But what's that law where after a certain time you can't be tried for the crime?
Statute of limitations.
Well, so get out of here, FBI or whatever.
In direct contrast, though, to the second half of the decade where I've bought every game that's come out
Yeah.
every week. I have every console.
Yeah.
And my life is revolves around buying video games.
It's dope.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah, it rules. You couldn't, people get wistful. They're like, oh, I miss being in my 20s. Like, you couldn't pay me any amount of money to be 23 again.
You could pay me $100 million.
Because then I'd be able to afford all those games.
Yeah.
And
No,
I'd
but
be
then
23.
you don't get it.
The money until you're in the 30s?
That's a good point. It goes into a trust fund and that, you have
Yeah,
to wait
fine.
out another
Sign
10
me
years.
up. Guess what? I'm 23 again.
Yeah.
I get to be able to fucking run. I get to have erections. I'm kidding. I've never had erections. Yeah, so there's no particular order for these. They're just 15 sort of top of the tops.
Yes.
Yep.
They're all hanging around the same sort of level.
Yeah, yes.
For
For various reasons.
And we'll go into those reasons. I guess
And just quickly, let's say we've not included really anything from 2019 because we
Yes.
just did our game of the year and it felt weird to just then do a big wrap of the decade where you're talking about something that came out a couple of months ago.
Totally.
Sure.
So-
We've talked about all of those games every week for the past year.
Yeah.
And even more specifically, we talked about the best ones very recently.
Yeah. I mean, we were talking off air about how Fire Emblem would probably be in the list for you and I, Ben.
Yes.
But we've talked about it heaps. So
There's
no-
one from last year that I've sort of sneakily snuck into this list.
Right?
I sneakily snuck it.
How
in.
did you... Okay.
Well, it'll be next week in the next week's part.
Okay.
But
But me and Ben only have to wait a couple of hours.
Yeah.
You at home have to wait 7 whole days.
We only have to wait 3 to 4 hours till this part is over.
so yeah, what do you reckon? Let's get fucking.
Well, let's kick it
Yeah.
off. I mean, what's exciting about doing this is we've been doing the show for what, four years?
Bit
or
over
something?
4
Bit
years.
over
This
4
will be
years.
the 5th year, 2020.
Yes.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
because we're talking about stuff from this full decade, it's an opportunity to go back in further back than, talk about stuff that has come out long before the podcast started and
Yeah.
stuff that we
Yes.
haven't really covered on the show at all.
Because there are
Totally.
some games, especially the good ones, that we talked about for multiple weeks.
Yeah.
Yeah,
consecutively
yeah.
of
We
this
actually got
podcast.
complaints about that
Yeah.
from
Sure.
some people, yeah.
And then they come up again and again, so it's good to move away from that and talk about other games.
Yeah.
So the first game on our list of the best of the decade, The Legend of Zelda: Breath of the Wild.
I've been dying to talk about this game for years.
I know. It's been such a frustrating thing to want to bring it up every week,
Yeah.
but never really getting the opportunity.
Well, it's so unique and brilliantly idiosyncratically designed that it doesn't relate to anything else.
No.
So you're never in a
Yes.
conversation that it sort of circles around that you can be like, you know what, this reminds me
Weirdly not influential either. So it has
Even-
not come up again.
of. Even though it came out in 2010, hasn't inspired anything else in the decade.
Yeah, Zelda Breath of the Wild is probably the best game of the last decade.
Yeah, and I think we've talked about it having possibly the claim to being the best game of all time.
It's one
in
of the few
conversation.
you can chuck in there.
Yep.
It's so fucking good.
Yeah.
Go through and listen to one of the 18 podcasts we did about it if you want to hear expanded thoughts, maybe.
Yeah. Maybe we should actually put some show notes with a link to,
Sure.
to the review.
Maybe.
Well, maybe let's quickly track through the vague history of it because it felt like it was on the boil for a long time.
Yes.
Zelda had a weird decade too because Skyward Sword came out towards the start of it on the Wii U. That was 2010, 2011.
Yeah, you're
And that
right.
was fucking terrible.
That was the one that was on the Wii as well, right?
Sorry, on the Wii.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, on the way, yeah. So it's probably not. It's probably.
I
just
think it was
before this decade.
2010.
Okay.
I think it sneaks in, but it fucking sucks. So who cares about talking about it on this episode? But
Well, it is part of the conversation because I think the response to it does directly influence the direction that they decide to go in. with Breath
completely.
of the Wild.
Yeah.
It felt like a huge stagnation of that formula.
Yep.
It felt like the ideas had run out. It felt like this motion-y direction that because Nintendo itself
Yeah.
had such a weird fucking decade
Yes.
that they had moved away from these traditional sort of games. They moved away from all this stuff that they created, but at the same time, those templates they created, particularly the Zelda one, were getting tired.
Yep.
And Mario was in like I guess they'd had the Galaxy games. They were great.
They had the Galaxy games, and they continued making the 2D ones, and then they did all of those like Mario Coda Paint over sports games and all that stuff as well.
So then A Link Between Worlds came out in 2013 on the 3DS, and that was fucking good.
Great game.
Right.
And it was like, oh, maybe they should just go back to the 2D Zeldas or something.
Yep.
And then they started showing off Breath of the Wild, originally intended for the Wii U.
Yes.
In
And
like 2014, maybe, something like that.
Right.
Yeah, they
Maybe
did.
earlier.
What did they do? They had a couple in a row that they had like a cutscene that they showed off that was like Link riding a horse and
One of the Guardians chasing him through the forest,
And,
shooting at him.
I remember because it's partly obscured Link, and there was like a lot of talk about people thinking it was a female Link.
Or like maybe you got
right.
to choose was a talk what the gender of your
Right.
Link was. And Nintendo hasn't progressed that much during the decade, but that it was kind of that was all there really was about it for a long time. And then at a couple of E3s they showed off like it's going to be an open world game now. And you can use the fucking dumb Wii U gamepad to aim your bow.
That's right.
Yeah.
And it looked a little bare.
Right.
Or something like that. I was my impression of it at the time. It
And
looked
when were these demos sort of happening? Like 15, 16?
14, 15-ish,
Right.
16.
I think it was ages until they showed off a demo. I remember there was that like cutscene, and then there was like the trailer that that showed off like
I
kind of
remember
wild areas, like environments, animals, and then it had a bit of-
Miyamoto and Enuma did something at one of the when Nintendo I think was still at E3.
Yep.
So maybe even
Oh, right,
maybe even Iwata was still, I can't remember, but there was something where they were with a bunch of trees and they were aiming the bow at one of the orcs or whatever they're called in that, moblins.
Bokoblins?
Bokoblins, Gesundheit. And that, it looked, and especially off the back of Skyward Sword,
Yep.
and with how the Wii U had been going for the couple years it had been
Right.
out.
Yeah.
I remember there was that trailer where the reveal at the end of it was what it was called.
Right.
Like it got to the end and it was like text came up, Legend of Zelda: Breath of the Wild.
Sure.
That was the first time from memory, the first time they announced the title.
Which I think
And-
is honestly the first time I became aware of it at all.
Right.
I was not tapped into what Nintendo were doing.
You'd
I
never
don't-
played a Zelda game, I don't think.
Yeah. And then I think Breath of the Wild, I remember hearing that during that reveal and being like, okay, maybe I'm interested in this.
Because there was that
I
trailer
don't know why,
where-
but I think just whatever that evoked, I was like, okay.
yeah. there was-
It's such a good title because it really does to give you that like kind of majestic-y beauty kind of thing that is what that game is trying to do
Yes.
through
Yeah.
and through. And the freedom and the
Yes.
adventurousness and all of that.
Yeah.
Because that trailer, like, it looked very, like, I loved the visual style and it looked really interesting with what they were doing with that. But it was very hard to grasp, like, well, okay, cool. There's this big world that's like, quote unquote, open world. But what do you, because I remember they said at one point it was open world. And then I think it was maybe Miyamoto who tried to like walk back from that. He was like, no, not really open world.
Right.
Like, I think he got a bit freaked about what people were taking that to mean, and of
It's
course,
not
then people
Grand
run,
Theft Auto, okay?
exactly, yeah.
And I
People
think-
run rampant with speculation about like, oh, you'll be able to do this and this and this and this, and it probably builds up maybe an unfair expectation.
Well, and I think in the other direction as well, I remember personally thinking, I think a lot of people thought this, they were like, oh, is it just like how Twilight Princess had a pretty big overworldy kind of area,
Right.
but it was not really that much to do in it?
Yeah,
Right.
Is it just going to be like a big field in the middle of some dungeons?
yeah,
Right.
But so then it kind of evolved as, speculation about the NX at the time happened. It became clear Nintendo were going to abandon the Wii U and move on. And then they abandoned Breath of the Wild being primarily a Wii U game and moved it over to the Switch.
Yep.
The Switch got announced and released in pretty quick
Yeah.
succession.
Yeah.
and because it got pushed back, Breath of the Wild, over the course of about 2 or 3 years.
It was meant to come out in 2016, and then I think they deliberately pushed it back to be a Switch launch game.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yes.
So I think it would have been out sort of mid to late 2016.
Yeah.
And at some point they were like, I think that E3 of 2016, they only showed that game
yeah,
and didn't really say that it was going to be on. I
That's
think they were
right.
like, it might be on the NX with blah, blah, blah. So
But it's weird because Zelda games traditionally have an element in them that is like you have an item or whatever it is that kind of mirrors the hardware that the game is on.
Right.
And so it's weird playing Breath of the Wild because he's got the Sheikah slate, which is quite clearly mirrored. A mirror of the Wii U gamepad.
Right.
Like it's got
Yeah,
this weird
yeah.
relic of how you can see, and the fact that it is big open world, being able to have like the map in front of you for the whole thing would have been so like clearly they were like developing it with that in mind.
it makes the menu stuff make a little more sense with like, you know, they edited it for the Switch
Yeah.
to be like, oh, change these powers and do that. But if you could have quickly equipped stuff and whatever with using the gamepad and cooked it,
Right,
that
like
sort of
yeah,
thing.
the powers specifically. That makes sense.
yeah.
Yeah.
And then like it got. I still can't quite believe that we played a demo
Yeah.
and we're like, I'm not sure about this game.
Yeah.
And it's obviously it turns out to be incredible.
It is one of the best games of all time and
Yeah.
probably the best game of the 2010s.
Yeah.
A revolutionary way of doing an old hat thing. We'll be talking about open world a lot.
I remember reading descriptions, reviews by people who played the game, who said it's revolutionizes open world action games, my favorite genre of the decade.
Right.
And me being like, Psh, what can that mean? Oh, they dumb it down a bit for
Right.
Nintendo? Okay, sure. And then buying it day one and being like, oh, I'm an idiot for ever doubting
Right,
this game.
right.
They had but that genre had stagnated by that point in the
Yeah.
decade. It was probably the most drawn from during that decade, and they really did find, in ways that we've talked about often, ways to make it new, and
Yeah.
make it fresh, and make
Yeah.
it exciting and different. And it's such a well put together game. Every single part of it is super well done.
Yeah.
Apart from maybe the combat. Maybe like the weapon degradation stuff. Maybe the
yeah.
simplicity of the combat is like the slightest blemish on it.
But I don't think it's executed poorly. It's like that's your opinion on the decision they made.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't mind that. I know the degradation of the weapons was very controversial. Some people absolutely hate it. I don't mind it. I think it adds to it. Like it's very nice, like realistic touch. Like this weapon blows up and you have to go and find a new one.
And it gives you an excuse to use everything too.
Yeah.
It
Yeah,
really
yeah,
it
yeah.
forces you to change it up, which is a problem that lots of games have. Of like, I've got the assault rifle and now this is an assault rifle game.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My
yeah.
only complaint, we've talked about this before, is just like for having this like huge, vast world that is meant to, that you go through different environments and climates. The fact that there are 3 different types of creature
Oh,
in terms of
Right.
enemies.
Yeah.
That's
Yes.
really the only thing
Yeah.
that I would have liked to see more variety of like creatures and enemies across the world.
Yeah, I
Sure.
think that's a fair
That's
criticism.
that's just a bizarre decision.
Yeah.
But it is the most fun. Such a huge game. It is the most sucked into a game I got
Yep.
all of that entire decade. I
Right.
think.
Those 2 weeks where it was just out and I knew we all did, so many people playing it all at the same time. And the fact that you come out of that, I mean, that's the thing, like that plateau area that we played in the demo that we all walked away. And I vividly remember the 3 of us all played it separately, but at the same time,
Yeah.
the timed thing. And then we all walk out and we're like, and then you come to realize like, well, that's just what that
Yeah.
it's a weird area of it to show off because it's not
Yeah.
indicative of the game at all. But hang gliding off that plateau and then just seeing everything in front of you and just going like, oh, I can just go in whatever direction. All right, I'll push up here.
Yeah.
Having those like couple of weeks where you're talking with people who are playing it. Everyone's gone off in a different direction. Everyone's having completely different experiences and finding different things at different times. Like it being out kind of at the tail end of summer here. I just remember sitting up late, like hot night, windows open, just cracking a cold bottle of San Pellegrino and just getting stuck in for hours. Like, yeah, it just such a great experience.
Because
Yeah.
it had that moment to moment like excitement, but then when you stack those moments into the fucking dozens of hours that you spend with that game, that's what made it into something special, where it just kept that pace for such a long time.
Yeah.
Of exploration and discovery.
Well,
Yeah.
that was it. They brought like mystery and intrigue, and they incentivized exploration in a really natural way. It wasn't a map with a bunch of collectathon points scattered across it. It was like, this is what it would be like if you just went out into a brand new world.
Yeah.
And they just nailed that.
Look beautiful, sounds beautiful.
Yep.
Finding all the towers was maybe my favorite thing of any game in a long time. I kind of want to start a new save file and just do that again. Just
Yeah.
like activate all the towers because that
Sure.
was just getting one, having a good vantage point, being able to see off in the distance where the next one was, and just be like, all right,
Yeah.
off I go.
So a game that could also have the subtitle Breath of the Wild, The Witcher 3.
The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt.
Yeah.
So two
very-
wild games right up
Two
top.
absolute wild ones.
The Witcher 3. Fuck, I loved the way that game sounded. Just up the
Yes.
top. That's my first thought, because I reckon under this we'll have edited a little bit of that. Kind of like fucking combat music.
Yep.
Damn, that game's cool. Yeah, The Witcher 3.
Yeah. A game that I struggled to get into
Sure.
the first time I played it. It has, I think, genuinely weird combat. Like, as contrasted with Breath of the Wild, I think The Witcher 3 is just like not perfectly tuned.
Especially when you crank up the difficulty, you're really needing to use those potions.
Yes.
You're needing to use all the fucking oils for your sword.
Yep.
Which is really satisfying once you kind of get into that system. It kind of has like that rock, paper, scissorsy type of thing of like
Yeah.
the different types of monsters will have a different ability that you have that works very well against them.
Yep.
And figuring that out the first time you fight them and trying to figure out the best way to... There's a way to quickly take down most monsters.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like
Yes.
it's a little combat puzzle. That was always very fun.
And as opposed to Breath of the Wild, a ridiculous variety of enemies and people and things and places. Everything looked different, but was united by this overall sort of aesthetic. Well written,
Yeah.
good characters.
Good performances.
Yeah, good performances.
Completely fully voiced.
Yeah.
And all of them interesting. And like I would actually sit there and listen to them saying the things rather than thumbing through the subtitles.
Yeah.
Another open world game and a little bit more of a traditional one, I guess, than Breath of the Wild, but probably the best executed open world game of if you think of that as like a genre or whatever,
Right.
out of the whole thing. Because it looked amazing. It was enormous and like had variety through it, but I think the way that it just pulled off that kind of setting of medieval fantasy type of thing with like the wind blowing through the trees,
Yep.
the view from the top of an icy cliff, looking down onto some shitty town with people going like, I'm a peasant, down there.
I mean, we've talked about it before, but like just the thing of walking through a village in The Witcher 3, not a particularly important one, a pretty small one, but everything you walk past has life to it. There's a chicken running across the road. There's like a little bunch of...
Why was it doing that?
Well, I mean, this might sound obvious to you.
Okay.
Just get
Well, because I'm assuming that when you give me the answer, it's going to be some sort of joke.
Oh, okay.
You made a ridiculous setup, a chicken crossing a road. Surely there's a joke coming.
Why would it do
Why
that?
would it do that?
Why would it do that?
Surely there's some sort of ridiculous joke coming.
Just to get... Let's get to the other side.
That's much simpler than I thought it was going to be. That's very funny.
Hiding in plain sight.
Yes.
Well, you've absolutely made me look the fool. But yeah,
And it's like you walk past a building, someone knocks on a door, for example.
who does?
But like, yeah, genuine. Like every inch of every town had personality, life, detail, depth to it.
Yeah.
It all sounded great. It all looked great. Yeah, I don't know if for me it's definitely the best open world game of the decade or my favorite. But
Sure.
but I think there's a legitimate claim to it maybe being the best executed for sure.
I think it is for me, just because the writing and the quality of the side quests and the reasons you were doing them was high the whole time.
Right.
Even if some idiot's asking you to get their frying pan or whatever, which I think was one of the quests in there, you walk into a house and there's some weird ghost or some shit in there.
Yes.
There's always some cool fantasy thing, but then it's like, the sort of... Game of Thrones-ish type of thing where it made it real world. So if there actually were goblins,
Yes.
they'd be scummy little idiots. And they're just
Sure.
like, hey, what's going on? Get out of here. I don't remember if they were goblins or if they did that, but it's that sort of thing.
Right, yes.
Goblin voice, same as the peasant voice.
Yeah, well, that's a class issue.
But it kept it fresh.
And sometimes it was a goblin stealing your frying pan. Sometimes it was a goblin murdering someone's child.
Right.
And both of those were executed in equally interesting ways.
That whole Red Baron quest that you do, where you have to get that World War I fighter plane down.
Yeah, Snoopy's
Bloody
flying
Baron.
around.
Bloody Baron.
Yeah.
It's this kind of fucked up story about
Yeah.
like a dead kid of his and all this shit. And like, I think because Geralt is such a like unfazed by anything, it makes this bizarre world anchored. Because he's just like, yep, that's whatever those things were called. They exist. Oh, well.
Yeah, sure.
I guess by now we'll have seen the Netflix series as well.
Oh,
Who knows if that'll be any
Is that
good.
out?
Yeah.
It is out at the end of December, which
Really?
has already passed.
Ah, interesting.
Yes.
Yeah, so engrossing as well, and just it was a little difficult to get into, but I think it earns your trust that everything will be interesting in it
Right.
at some point, because you get through enough and it seems like this big task almost, and it does have that open worldy stuff of like, I'm riding my horse all the way here. But the more and more that you sink into it, you know that there's going to be something interesting to see coming up.
Sure.
And you start to enjoy that little journey because you realize how well realized this world is with all these wolves roaming around, and there's like a little story over here. And if you do go on that sort of, just riding a horse through the forest thing, it'll be so beautifully done
Yes.
that it will be enjoyable.
The second time that I played it and I really got into it, I spent a lot of time, as I did in similar games, just sort of like riding up a hill at sunset.
Yeah.
And stopping and turning the camera around and being like, this is incredible.
Yeah, get a load of this Foley work.
Yeah.
But it's serious, like really.
Yes.
The fucking crunch of the gravel underneath your foot is well done. Every part of that game is really well put together.
Yeah.
And so unique whilst still being in this pretty overused setting.
Well, I think the fact that it's sort of more of like a gothic fantasy in a way helps it be more interesting.
Yes.
It has such a dark tone to a lot of it. And yeah, even applying that to just like the creatures and stuff, it's all pretty kind of gross and yucky, and that Game of Thrones realistic setting, I think.
But then it uses that dark tone to create light moments in it.
Yeah.
To have this sort of dark comedy running all the way through that really worked for me.
Yeah.
Beautiful game, fun to play.
Great DLC.
Great DLC.
Like, honestly, it becomes like, what, a 90-hour game?
It's fucked.
Yeah.
Yeah. Two kind of similar games. But speaking of taking an overused topic and then doing something interesting with it,
Yes.
let's throw out another game of the decade, Telltale's The Walking Dead. I loved the first season of this game when I played it. It was such a fucking... Like, episodic games hadn't really been a thing that much by then.
Yeah, was it Telltale that really were the trailblazers in that regard?
So Valve did Half-Life Episode 1 and 2.
Fuck, that's
in
right.
the 2000s.
But
Telltale
they
had
only
done...
did 1 and 2, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So and they came out quite a long time apart from each other, so it didn't really count in my opinion.
Yeah.
And then Telltale had been doing the Sam and Max games, and then like a Monkey Island series, and maybe a Jurassic Park one before this.
Right.
Back to the Future even might have been before this. They did a bunch
They just went crazy, snapping up IPs.
Yeah.
to the point where they blew up their company because of it.
Yes. Because I am interested to talk about this game in the context of Telltale. Because
Yeah.
I never hugely got into the Walking Dead series.
Right.
I liked it. I played, I think, the first maybe 3
Sure. Series of them or 3 episodes of the first series?
series.
Right.
First 3 series.
Yeah.
Yeah. And liked sort of the mechanics, the storytelling. Wasn't something that I'd experienced before. I didn't play those ones that they released in the previous decade.
Right.
But I was a bit over zombies, and I didn't get into the Walking Dead comics or TV show hugely.
Sure. Well, this one came out in 2012.
Right.
So it was like right as the Walking Dead TV show was having its moment.
Yeah, yeah.
I like the Walking Dead comics up to
Right.
where I read. I didn't finish them, but they were good. And I liked this game so much because it took that kind of new format of these episodic games released over the course of something like a year. There were, I think, 5 parts, and took the adventure game template, which was having a sort of revival, and then did something a bit new with it, and then took the thing that kind of Mass Effect promised and delivered-ish on, of your choices will affect the outcome of this story.
Right.
And it did that pretty well. It felt like, at least, like you were responsible for some characters living or dying. You were responsible for certain things happening or not happening. And even if it did still kind of guide you down the one path, which I think it does to a pretty large extent, it did a good job of masking that and making it feel like you had made this happen.
Right.
There's a couple of things in there, like someone... well, you know what? I don't even know if I remember it well enough to spoil it, but someone like leaves your
From
group.
8 years ago.
Sure. Someone leaves your group and steals like your truck or something when they go. And it really felt like she'd done that because I had pissed her off or something.
Right.
And I think she always does it.
Right.
But it felt like it was my mistake.
Well, that's my favorite Telltale games are like The Wolf Among Us and actually I love the Game of Thrones one.
Yeah. Telltale as a whole for this decade, I think, is kind of what we're putting on here.
Yeah, I think so. Like the Batman
extent.
games, like but I specifically replayed The Wolf Among Us and Game of Thrones and really did notice on those second playthroughs, like, some of these you literally can't impact.
No.
Right.
It's a lot more linear than it makes itself out to be, but it is effective if you play it once at making it seem like you made it happen.
Absolutely, yeah.
Which is enough of a trick to make it kind of good.
Yeah, I think
that's
so.
great.
Yeah. And then that story in the first season, I loved.
Right. Those characters are like now just among the pantheon of characters.
Right. That Lee, who you play in as the first one, Clementine, who's like sort of your, person you're looking after.
Yeah.
And then Clementine becomes a protagonist for the remaining series. I really like the second series as well.
Yeah.
And then sort of dropped off. I think I played a couple of episodes of the third and never played the fourth.
Right.
But the waiting for the next episode to show up, the sort of little cliffhangers it would leave you with, that experience of playing a TV series effectively over the course of a few months was really, really cool.
Yeah.
And something pretty unique at the time until they did it 450 times. And then you're like, okay.
Yeah.
And then
but honestly,
the business world was like, okay.
Towards the end, even, I still was excited.
Well, those Batman ones, you liked those. And those were like, I think, maybe some of their last things.
Definitely. They were... Like, I still have a Guardians of the Galaxy one I own that I haven't played yet.
Fuck, I'd forgotten they'd even done that.
But, like, they had announced, Wolf Among Us Season 2.
I think they were going to do an Avengers one even, or there was talk about that.
But I was still excited I wanted to know what they were going to be, what licenses they were going to acquire, because I wanted to play them.
They were good stories.
Yeah.
Yeah, same as with Witcher 3, I think writing in games is such an important thing to you and me especially.
Yes.
Tommy, you like it, but you need to learn to read, really.
Yeah, you appreciate it sort of from a distance.
Yeah, like,
I
those
don't
are
really
pretty
care.
shapes.
Yeah.
But
honestly, I think this would be fair to say maybe, Tommy, you appreciate the visual aesthetic more. Like you might weight it more.
I like aesthetic and I just like fun.
Yeah.
I just like having fun. I just like fucking around. Like I can be very forgiving of poor or non-existent writing.
I guess you are the platformer fan of the three of us.
Yeah.
So that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
and these at times definitely aren't fun in terms of gameplay. You're not doing that much. Like they threw in those couple of like fucking shooting segments or whatever that sucked. It was just point and click on this shape.
Exactly. The gaming segments were bad.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But it was this engaging story that really drove you through.
I tried to play one of these probably on the iPad. Does that make
Yeah, they came out on pretty
Would that
much
be a
everything,
thing?
I think.
Yeah.
And I think at the time I was reading the comics and really enjoying them. I had tried with the TV series but couldn't really get into it. I think it maybe just started. And so I was already like a little fatigued on Walking Dead media.
Sure.
And just, I didn't dislike it, but just never came back to it.
Yeah.
It's just a bit like, I don't really know what I was expecting. I think maybe the fact of just being completely fatigued out on the Walking Dead universe. Because they're not They kind of take place in the same world as the comics, but it's a completely different story, right?
It's a
not
side
the same
story.
characters. Yeah.
I think one character from the comics shows up in the first series, like for a
Right.
bit as a side character.
Right.
But
Which that's a cool choice.
yes,
Yeah.
it's its own separate thing, and that was a really big positive about
Right.
it with me because the TV show had followed the same story as the comics pretty
Yeah.
much.
And it felt like it went a lot slower. I remember
Yeah.
watching the first couple of episodes and being like, yeah, let's get into some new terrain.
Yeah.
I liked about those things, and this did this of characters that were significant just dying, and then like deal with that now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Try and figure out what's happening now that one of the protagonists is gone.
Mm.
Yeah, great game. Real stalwart of the decade, that sort
Yeah.
of Telltale style stuff. Then you get things like Life is Strange and whatever popping up that
Yep.
kind of are doing this similar thing. I think you could point to the popularity of, in quotes, the walking simulator
Right.
having something to do with this style of game coming back.
Sure, the focus being more experiencing a story.
Yeah.
Yeah. And like a weird hybrid adventure game thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think that Telltale's The Walking Dead, a good symbolic version of that, of a trend that happened during the decade.
Oh yeah.
The decade had a lot of trends, didn't it? Moving on, I guess maybe it'd be time to talk about one of the
Adam,
big.
you just walked across set and sat in a big armchair.
Yeah, they've
We
just
do
had
all
that.
these in a TV studio, we should say.
We just
Yeah.
had the cooking segment. I've gone, thanks for that, Marsha. Now, have you ever been at home and thought, damn, I wish my lawn... Oh, well, you wouldn't say damn on a morning TV, but...
Done. I wish
Done.
my mop could also serve as a hairdryer.
Well, that's ridiculous. Take these insanity pills that we're selling today. Microtrans. So yeah, the one of the big trends of the decade.
Yep.
One of the biggest of those, especially in the back end,
Yes.
and I think this includes DLC, is microtransactions.
Yep. Yep.
DLC got massive.
Yep.
DLC kicks it off.
For sure. Like that had sort of happened mid 2000s onwards.
Yeah.
You were
When
getting-
did No Scrubs come out? I love DLC.
God damn it.
Oh,
Dender loving care. Waterfalls
Yeah.
is actually the best one.
Yeah.
Horse Armor, one of their best songs. that was the first thing I remember was in Oblivion. There was like $9 or whatever Horse Armor.
Yeah.
That was one of the first sort of microtransaction things. It was all DLC back then. And then the Mass Effect games had big
Yeah.
DLC components.
The Call of Duty and Battlefield
Yeah.
having sort of like
The season pass equivalents.
yeah.
And they just did them as packs throughout the year, and
Yeah.
season passes showed up in like early 2010s, probably.
Yeah.
And so it was season passes. It was online passes for a while.
Yes.
Things like Uncharted 3 would come with a little online pass that if you then bought a secondhand copy of it, you couldn't play the multiplayer mode
Yeah, that's
until you
right.
paid for like a $10 online multiplayer pass.
Right.
And then that started morphing more and more into what are today's microtransactions, which is not even paying a small amount of money for sort of...
Tangible thing.
a
in the
coat
game.
of paint on your gun or
Yeah.
something.
The loot boxes started showing up
Yeah.
Yeah.
around the mid-2000s.
Literal gambling.
I don't know what would have been
What's-
the earliest example of
Yeah.
that. I know Overwatch...
Try and Google and see if there's.
Yeah, the first instance of loot boxes.
randomized loot box type stuff would have shown up in mobile games first. It was in your Clash of Clans type shit. I
Oh,
believe.
right.
And then it sort of bled over because the lingo around it wasn't so much microtransactions. It was like mobile game elements
Right.
in console games.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
in PC games.
Okay, here we go. The
Which
first
is-
known instance of a loot box system is believed to be an item called Gachapon Ticket, which was introduced in the Japanese version of Maple Story, a side-scrolling MMORPG.
Gotcha games are a catch-all term for like a very money-grubbing mobile game that
Right.
really wants you to pay for
Yeah.
more hours of play or
So that
whatever.
was 2004 that first
Yeah.
Right.
popped up.
And it really fucking took off, like your FIFA cards and all that sort of shit.
All your fighting games having like your cosmetic, things
Yeah.
bundled into a loot box.
Right. So that, like, A, just the cosmetic stuff costing money. B, the, hey, pay this money to get X amount of currency for, like, maybe playtime or for whatever. And then C, randomized loot box stuff, which got to the point in a very short period of time, looking back on it.
Yeah.
Sort of 2 years, like 2016, 17 kind of thing.
Yeah.
Star Wars Battlefront 2 was a big
Yeah.
fucking example of it.
Yep.
Hammered for it.
Yeah.
It got to the point where countries have made legal
Yeah.
rulings on whether or not this is allowed. It's been banned in certain I think like Denmark was one of the first
Yeah.
to lead a like, hey, this is allowing underage people to gamble.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's been a big thing that's kind of like come to prominence and had big backlash in the time that we've been doing this pod. Yeah, over the course of this show.
For sure. And like it definitely rose up during this decade, and it is almost wholly a negative trend.
Yeah.
Team Fortress 2 is listed on the Wikipedia for it as one of the first Western ones.
Hats.
Like 2011. I think.
Right.
It was people making jokes about hats. I remember that. People going, you could buy, cosmetic little fucking hats for your things. It's like, oh, I've got a top hat, $3.
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever paid money for a cosmetic thing. I don't think I've ever interacted with a microtransaction.
Oh.
For a cosmetic thing. I
bought
don't think I have.
Every bit of DLC that I fucking can, because it feels like the game isn't complete. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah.
There are DLCs that I bought that I've never played
Yeah, same.
because it just feels weird to and then this is like the decade where people would start talking about how chunks of games were effectively ripped out to sell then as
Yeah.
DLC down the
That's
track.
the most egregious thing, I think, because if you can buy a hat for $1,
yeah.
that's a choice that you make, and I think certainly the marketing around it should be, very closely monitored and regulated.
Yeah.
Because you shouldn't be spruiking a hat to a child and misleading them about it and saying you need to pay $1 for this
Yeah.
cowboy hat because
You want to be a cowboy, don't you? Baby Kid Rock going like, yes!
and so that's sort of almost that's my issues with the advertising industry maybe, but like cosmetic stuff, sure, it's when they take out aspects of the game's content, make you pay for it, or if they alter aspects of a normal single player game's content and make it worse because they then retroactively bundle in stuff you have to pay for.
Yeah.
That's where it gets real fucked, and I think that was the tipping point.
It was day one DLC started showing up
Yep.
where even the code would be on the disc for it, and when you bought the thing, it would unlock it. Mass Effect 2 had that.
Right.
That had the fucking Cerberus pass thing.
Right.
And like one of the side characters. They literally ripped out of...
Which one was that? Because I know that Shadow Broker was Mass Effect 2 DLC, wasn't
Yeah,
it?
and there was good DLC for Mass Effect.
Yeah,
Great
that was
DLC.
great. Yeah.
But there was a character on day one. I think his name was like Cade or something. He was like that British assassin guy.
Oh, really?
Or South African assassin guy.
Yeah.
Yeah, he
Thane?
came with it if you bought it. Not Thane, not the fish guy.
Right.
Not Shape of Water.
Yeah.
Human like...
Oh, yeah. The mercenary guy.
the mercenary guy.
Zane or Zaid or something.
Zaid?
Yeah.
Yeah. One of the One Directions.
Yeah.
And-
No, I know who you mean now, yes.
And you got him similar to like the online pass thing. You got it if you bought the game new, but if you were to buy it secondhand,
Right.
you wouldn't have this content.
Yeah.
And it's shifty.
Yeah.
It's a grift. It's a scam.
Yep.
And it's a entirely negative trend that has only gotten worse in this decade as people have gotten more used to the idea of spending money online, I guess.
Yeah.
Is part of it.
Yes.
So
Yeah, I remember that period of time where it was initially like, I don't think I want to have a PayPal account because doesn't that mean the internet can steal my bank monies?
right.
And that just becoming like we now have fucking short-term loans.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Are
changing
just
over
part
like
of our
I spent
lives.
$14,000 on this mobile game.
Yeah.
Is wild.
Yeah.
Deliberately marketing it to kids. There are crime organizations that use FIFA to launder money.
Oh,
It,
I didn't know that.
It's wild.
It's
Yeah.
insane.
They one account buys the fucking packs and then the other one buys it off them for X amount of money and then that's clean money now.
Yeah, right.
Something like that.
It's crazy.
Fuck.
I don't know exactly how it works because I'm not in a crime syndicate. But if I were,
Yes.
it would not be for that.
Right.
It's honestly towards the end of the decade seems like it's gotten better. Is the
Yeah.
one good thing.
Yeah.
It seems like they pushed it as far as they fucking could. Actual government stepped in and went, "Hey, this is fucked.
This is a
Yeah.
casino.
And they've backed off before that it has to get more and more legislated, which is good.
yeah.
So hopefully that's a trend that we'll look back on
Yeah.
to some extent. But DLC for sure is huge.
Yep.
Is always going to be here, and game companies will find ways to monetize their games beyond selling you the product more and more and more as we move on in time.
Yeah, and that's fine. Like a good implementation of DLC, something that's a huge game out of the box. That then, hey, we've had a bit more time now. It's popular. Here's like a new little bit of story you can buy for $10.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah, if
Sure.
it's actual content,
Yeah.
that's good.
It's like an expansion pack. They used to be there around all the time.
Yeah.
It's like a new game in some ways.
Yeah.
Well, and yeah, the genesis of it being companies wanting to avoid the thing of someone buys a game, they trade it in, they resell it.
Yeah,
Someone else buys it
Right.
from them. So maybe like one copy of the game has been bought 3 or 4 separate times,
Yeah.
but the company has only gotten one share of revenue from that.
Yeah.
So them just trying to encourage people, don't get rid of your copy. Hang on to it. There'll be new stuff coming out. So from that point of view, it's like, yeah, well, that makes sense. That's fair enough to want to try and get people to hang on to it and to keep as much of the funds coming back to you as possible.
Yeah.
But then when it gets stretched into the nefarious sort of side of it is, yeah.
Games cost a lot to make now as well, and the
Yeah.
price of them new hasn't really gone up for a long time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it is another way to supplement your income
Yep.
by, instead of making a game cost $80 new, have a fucking dumbass premium edition, and that's $80 new and has a hat.
Yeah.
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 But
Games as a service and
Yeah.
online stuff we'll talk about probably in a different section.
sure, but yeah, it's something that looked for a while like it was going to point towards a grim dystopian future. Mm-hmm. Speaking of a grim dystopian future, Margaret, let's move on to another one of the best games of the last 10 years. Took me a long time to figure out how many years are in a decade. This thing.
If only there was a clue.
Do you guys want to talk about Nier Automata?
I mean, I am happy to listen to you talk about it, but I haven't finished it. I haven't even
Right.
finished it once.
Yep.
It's a great game to the extent that I love the design, I love the music, I love the weird characters, the setting. It's all really cool, really intriguing. I haven't gotten to the point where it becomes a masterpiece art.
Sure.
form.
Me either, yeah. And
Yeah.
that's, the knowing that you've got to sink a great deal of time into it
Yeah.
before it really reveals itself. It's, it's a big glaring one of my long-term pile of shame.
I think a big part of the reason that Nier Automata deserves a place on this list, beyond it being a really great piece of work,
Yes.
by the time you've done it all, I think it is a good poster child for the resurgence of particularly unique Japanese games
Right.
on that like B tier game. You know what I mean? There was a part there where it was like AAA stuff and then maybe indie stuff, but that
Right.
middle ground went away.
Right.
And this, I think, fits into that.
Yeah, sure.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally.
It doesn't have to be constrained by a sort of blockbuster
Yeah.
game, sort of the expectations that having to be sort of broadly appealing.
Yeah.
And it's not restricted by the limited budget of a very small indie game.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's
and
this
to have a thing that doesn't fully reveal itself to you until
Yeah.
hours and hours in, which is such a big ask, such a
Yes.
leap.
Well, and I think it's a good example of this kind of really thing that I think has come to a lot more prominence during the last decade of a very focused artistic game.
Right.
An auteur game, kind of.
Yeah, yeah.
I think stuff like Doki Doki Literature Club fits into the category of what Nier Automata is.
Yeah.
Or like Death Stranding.
Yep.
And there's probably other examples I'm not thinking of now, but it is such a complete piece of art
Yeah.
in its weird, eccentric strange little niche that it occupies.
It doesn't water itself down to be accessible.
No.
Which is the hallmark of a piece of art.
Totally.
Yeah.
And it is watering itself down to be accessible is the mark of a video game, usually.
Yeah, yes, absolutely.
Like you were saying, they tried to broaden the appeal as much as possible. The Call of Duties and the Assassin's Creeds of the late 2000s and a lot of the 2010s.
Yeah.
I think, represent this kind of almost soulless capitalist game.
Yep.
And Nier Automata is the opposite of that. I mean, it's got like a $15 DLC that's just fucking sexy outfits for these characters.
Yeah, there's other issues with
There's
it.
weird shit with it.
As all artists.
Yeah.
There's some skeletons in the closet.
Absolutely. But it's a unique and eccentric game that occupies, this quirky little middle ground that I think came back during the 2000s and particularly from Japan.
Yeah.
Ben, how would you feel about me asking Adam to spoil the game for us?
Okay. I'll do it.
I mean,
I'd like to.
me too.
What
but,
about some
we're-
broad strokes that you won't really remember when you come to them,
Okay.
when you go to play it,
Yeah.
that just give you a sense of the overall feeling of the experience?
Well, that'd
yeah.
be good because I don't know what I haven't got to, which
Yeah.
is making it hard for me to get motivated to
Right.
get to it.
I'm going to spend 2 minutes spoiling Nier Automata now. Skip ahead if you want to.
Yep.
Yep.
Um,
Because we've talked about it a bit and danced around it, but it's been out for long enough that, look, and I do really want to get around to it, but who knows if I ever will. And I'm really, really curious to know what this thing is about it that everyone
Sure.
says really flips and completely changes your perception.
Yeah,
of it.
yeah, that's fair.
So you play through it 5 times.
Mm-hmm.
There are
Right.
5 A, B, C, D, and E playthroughs, the main ones. There's also 21 other endings.
Right.
Most of them jokes, and the credits will go brrrr and just zip through.
Right.
Like if you eat a poisonous fish, it gives you ending K.
Right.
And it's like, you died because you ate this fish, fuckhead. Start again.
Okay.
And it's a joke ending, and it doesn't really end.
Yeah, yeah.
It has a lot of that stuff. It fucks with the form of being a video game in that way really often throughout it.
Right.
So the first playthrough is a pretty standard thing of like an action game where you're fighting these robot enemies who are controlled by aliens. In the subsequent playthroughs, you find out, those aliens were actually dead the whole time, and the humans that you thought living on the moon are actually dead the whole time. So you're just these godless machines, and the whole theme is like, can we kill God? And they actually mean, can we kill the humans?
Right.
Because we hate them.
Right.
You're these fucking androids, which is part of the reason you look like a sexy android, because the humans made you to look like sex robots.
Right.
Because of course they fucking did.
yeah, yeah.
Then you've got these other machines who have realized they've lost their god, these aliens, and are no longer fighting for them and have developed souls because of that, and like end up being these like free and kind robots living in the forest
Oh,
who you
yeah,
end up interacting
yeah.
with.
Yeah.
You end up seeing one of those robots having to react to the massacre of a whole bunch of children that it's looking after. It goes into these really fucked up kind of bizarre situations like that. You fight these twins. The specifics of the story are going to escape me. You see the robots fucking.
I actually think maybe I got to the second playthrough.
Well, so you see it a couple of times because the first playthrough
right.
you play through is 2B.
Yeah.
The second one you're this 9S character. The third time I think you're like A2 or whatever her name was, and you go through a couple of other characters that you have to play this through as.
Right.
Right.
And you see these stories from different perspectives, and then it moves on to this other stuff. It keeps fucking with your expectations in that way, and going back through and recontextualizing stuff that you've seen previously.
Right.
With a really specific thing that I can remember and was a great example of how it uses itself as being a video game to convey story and a tone and an emotion that it wants to do. At the very, very end of the game, during the credits, so there are segments in it where you're like the little 2D spaceship having to shoot the little balls if you're like hacking something during the regular game. You're that spaceship and you're shooting the credits. And it wants you to get through the credits, but they get too fucked. You can't do it.
Right.
But then it says, hey, don't worry about it because the souls of other players are going to come and help you. And then all of these other spaceships come in and the music starts to swell. It's got fucking amazing music, this game. And you end up shooting all the credits with all these other players who have gone through the credits as well.
Right.
And it's got recordings of their thing. And then at the very end, it says, hey, by the way, all of those people who just helped you, they helped you because they deleted their game save to help you. And you've got a
Right.
choice now. You can either delete all your progress and get rid of everything that you've just done to help other people, or you can selfishly keep it and never help anybody else.
Right.
And it gives you choices like that, and it starts
Right.
getting real like philosophical towards the second part. And it needs to go through that first part of being a pretty straightforward action game to get to those moments in the last few things where it's like, hey, by the way, when you were doing this, like, why were you doing this? Was it because I
Right.
told you to do it?
Right.
And I being the game.
Which is a much more subtle version of Spec Ops: The Line.
Right. Exactly.
Doing it in a real fucking ham-fisted and not interesting way.
And it's a thoughtful and weird and it uses the medium well.
I also think it's a more interesting version of it than Journey.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. It's
Yeah.
that same sort of thing because it puts the onus of you on you of like, hey, we're not just doing this because it feels good. It's like you have to lose something.
Right.
You either have to be a cunt or help. And those choices that it gives you and the way that it portrays or presents similar philosophical kind of things throughout the sort of second half of it is really interesting. And it keeps presenting you with these really well thought out situations with an interesting art style, fantastic music, and a fun world to explore and all this sort of stuff. It's something that you need the entirety of it to have the context to enjoy, but I think it becomes amazing once you go through that whole thing. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Barely.
But it is similar.
That sounds incredible. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's great.
Yeah.
And there's a few games like that came out this decade where I think video games as an art form and as a medium have been pushed so much further
Yeah.
in the last 10 years than they ever had been. And I think this is a good representation of that.
Yeah. Sounds great. A lot of deep thinking there. A lot of big ideas and
Yep.
big concepts. I tell you what, my little brain is absolutely sore from thinking about all that stuff.
Is it?
I could
really?
really handle just switching off and playing something that is simplistic to the point of being borderline insulting.
Well, Tommy, why don't you play one of the Mario games?
Thanks, Marsha.
I'll do you one better than that, Ben. Why don't I play all of the Mario games that came out between 2010 and 2019?
Here we go, off the rails. Don't you know it's time to raise our sails? It's freedom like you never knew. 20 bags for a pass. Say the word, I'll be there in a flash. You could say my hat is off to you.
Except for the new Super Mario games. I
Yeah,
reckon
yeah.
they're not
Right,
included in
right.
this.
Yeah, sure.
But we have cheated for this
So
entry.
from Galaxy 2 and then like Super Mario 3D Land and 3D World.
Yep.
What
Mario Kart 8 as well, and the
Mario-
Mario
yes.
Makers and Mario Odyssey. We're just lumping them all in together.
Yeah.
Because that goes through a fair chunk of really a lot of like reinvention of this series of a 3D Mario platformer within the it starts off the start of the decade. Mario Galaxy 2 comes out. Leftover ideas from Mario Galaxy 1. Great games. So many ideas in there. They then sort of scale that back a little bit and then do 3D Land and 3D World, which is sort of more very like just simplistic
Like isometric almost. Yeah.
levels. And then they close out basically close out the decade with Mario Odyssey going back to the formula that they kind of popularized in, 1996 with Mario 64.
Sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, just those 3D Land and 3D World are like two of my favorite games of all time.
Absolutely. I think if we had to nail this down to one Mario game, it would be 3D World.
Is
I would
that
agree
the
with that,
Wii U one?
That's
Yeah.
the Wii U
right.
one.
Yeah.
Right. Because I have... actually, I don't have anymore a 3DS, but I had one and I played 3D Land on it.
Yeah.
And I loved it.
it's so good.
Yeah.
It's so good.
Both of those games are great. It's insane that they're not on the Switch.
Yeah.
I'm done with the remasters and the remakes, but I'd be more than happy to have
Yeah.
one of them or a double pack or whatever.
It's
on
bizarre that they didn't do it. I guess Captain Toad Treasure Tracker is in here as well. That was sick.
Oh,
It's an
yeah.
off. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
bonus levels of 3D World.
Yeah.
But it's a shame that more people haven't played those two, or specifically 3D World, because it was on a console that no one had. It's so good, and just like it's just so easy to sink hours into. And you were talking about the kind of things that I specifically enjoy in games, and like this is it to a T.
Yeah.
Just like nice aesthetic and just fun and just constant new ideas every 3 seconds. Every level having something new in it. Jumping in and being like, okay, what's going to be the thing here?
Jumping in. He said jumping in.
Yeah,
Ben.
I heard.
Oh,
chicken.
like the game.
Yeah.
Yeah, like
right,
the
right.
protagonist, Jumpman.
Like the little cherries that split you off and
Yeah.
create 2 of you, and then one of them gets another cherry, and then all of a sudden there's like 18 of you running around the level. Like, yeah. The only thing I don't love about 3D World is it felt like it was kind of leaning a bit on the like, hey, get 4 of you playing the level, which I never did, and I'm sure is fine. But
Right.
I maybe prefer Land a little bit more because it just is. It's purely
more
just
focused.
like single player.
Yeah.
I always felt like I was slightly missing out with 3D World by not playing it with 4 people.
I can see that. The co-op stuff in the Mario games, in those new Super Mario Brothers games as well,
Yes.
never appealed to me.
Yeah.
It was the first one on the Wii where they were like, oh, you can have
Yes.
2 players and there's a bubble and the 2 toads are part of it now as well.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, I remember playing that first one on the Wii with my girlfriend at the time and it being like, oh, this is cool. But, yeah, I don't think it necessarily added anything to the game in terms of a real game.
Agreed.
thing.
Yeah, the problem with that stuff is it's rare that you get together with someone who has played it as much, who is of a similar skill level, like knows what they're doing, and you kind of like can play through the levels together. It's either like a novelty thing of like, hey, some friends around, let's each grab a Wiimote and I'll show you how to play. And invariably, 2 people in the group are absolutely shithouse at it, which has its own fun. If you're having a couple beers and fucking around, like it's fun enough. But in terms of like legitimately playing through this game with someone else, I've never like. Friends of mine that are like also playing it, to the same extent that I am. It's rare that, but well, basically never happens that I would hit them up and go, "Hey, come round and we'll play it together."
Yeah.
Mario
Never
games
seemed like
Yeah.
they're frustrating enough if you fuck them up on your own.
Yeah.
If
Yeah.
someone else fucks it up for you, get out of my house.
Now,
Yeah.
I think my personal favorite Mario game of the decade is the opposite of that. It's perfect for multiple people to play. Everyone can play it because they've been playing it at parties since they were 11 years old. Mario Kart.
Yeah.
It's just, I think 8 Deluxe, the Switch version, is the perfect Mario Kart game. And Mario Kart as a formula, it's just the best.
Yeah.
Like whoever thought it up, you're a genius.
Yeah.
You've
Shigeru
nailed it.
Miyamoto.
Who?
Actually, I don't know if it was him for Mario Kart.
I don't know that it was.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it's so good, and it launching, like bringing that out, re-releasing that on the Switch within the first like whatever it was, couple of months of it being out.
Yeah.
Such a slick move. Like, I when that game came out on the Wii U, I just loved it so much, and like, no one was playing it. Like, it felt great when it came out, and so many people got a Switch day one because of the portability and because of Zelda, and then a couple of months later, people going like, "Fuck, this is so good."
Yeah.
All
Which
the DLC on it.
We didn't really
yeah.
make a meal of it before, but Zelda did come out. Breath of the Wild came out on the Wii U too, which is crazy. It was it was the like swan song for that.
Yeah,
Because that's how
console.
did you play
Yeah,
that?
I played it on the Wii U, and it was
Yeah.
great on there. So there were a lot of good games on the Wii U for as poor of a decade, or what, fucking 6 years or something that it
Yeah.
had, less 5. It had some really good games. Mario Kart 8, 3D World, and Breath of the Wild being the top 3, 2 of
And
which are available on the Switch.
Mario Maker being
Yeah.
like,
Oh,
you
yeah.
know, being a big thing for them, and then that inspiring the sequel. Splatoon becomes a big
That's
thing
right.
for Nintendo, like
Yeah.
one of their
Yeah.
new IPs. They put out a Donkey Kong Tropical Freeze. That was the frustrating thing about the Wii U. They put out some of their best stuff
Yeah.
they've ever put out, and as much as remakes are a pain in the ass, and we talk about it a lot, it's like they brought out so many great games on this system that no one played. So
Sure.
I personally can't really fault them for just being like, you know what, this needs a home on a console that people actually have and
Yeah.
can play these like games. Like,
Just blanket putting these Mario ones on there as well. I think Mario games are like default video game to me.
yeah,
Yeah.
They are just the vanilla of what a video game is, but in a great way.
It's
Yeah.
insane that that's applicable to the platformers and to Mario Kart. Mario Kart, it's like fucking billiards or something. You know?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
It's just a game that should have always existed and will always exist.
Right.
Like billions.
But it's like, I mean,
the Roaring 20s.
I was thinking of pool because it's like, It's something that you play while you're having a few beers.
So
Anyone
doesn't
can
matter
play
your skill
it.
level.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's
Absolutely.
always fun.
Yeah.
And
Even
it's
if you're
just
bad
like
at it, it's fun.
a basic, it's base game.
Yeah,
And-
100%.
Yeah.
It's probably the one game that, people who don't play video games know what it is
Yeah.
and know enough about the fundamentals that you can be like,
Because it's racing.
this
Everyone knows how
button,
to
you push
race.
this to shoot, this
Yeah.
is what these do.
Yeah.
Fuck, muddle through it, you'll work it out.
Yeah.
And yeah, just the whole design and style of 8 is so good. You know, they kind of do their little refinements with each one. Like in 7, it was like, now you can have a little hang glider come out of this, which don't really shift it up too much. But like the whole thing in this one of in Mario Kart 8 of having anti-gravity where you can go upside down and underneath the track. When you're actually doing it, it doesn't really alter things that much. But you know, when you see the track at the start and it's got these big crazy. And yeah, this was the first game.
Focusing on the slides too.
Yeah.
On your, and on your power sliding.
Yes.
This was Mario Kart 8 was the first, I believe, the first Nintendo game to have DLC. It was their first foray into that.
Sure.
All
It was a
right.
few months after it had come out. They just out of the blue were like, "Hey, we're bringing out a pack where
Here's
there's
a
going to be new
Mercedes
tracks."
Benz and shit.
Yeah.
Mercedes stuff was free.
Right.
There was a weird thing where they just put this update, but then you could buy the pack that had Link, the villager from Animal Crossing, and then 4
Yeah.
new cups.
Right.
Was half retro cups and then tracks and then half new tracks.
That's right.
And it had that F-Zero track in it. And
Maybe Smash Brothers for the Wii U around the same time had the DLC too.
Yes.
That started having like cloud and shit. But I think just like the Mario games all being apart from the new Super Mario Bros. Games and adding Mario Kart all together as a pack, like Mario Kart 8, the most refined and like you say, perfect version of that.
Yep.
But it's like that Nintendo inventiveness that Mario consistently has, apart from the new Super Mario Bros. Games. I think,
What about Mario Strikers Football?
not a Mario game.
Yeah.
That's a football game. That's FIFA.
Sure.
But it's I don't know. They're kind of the one continuous thing to me.
In
those
video
Mario
games.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we are cheating by lumping them together like this.
Yeah.
But
Who's going to fucking clamp down on us? Well,
Yeah.
This is our show.
the government.
Yeah.
What I find so
Denmark?
interesting about the Mario platformers, the 3D platformers specifically, is like I can't really think of too many other things culturally that have been around for as long and been as consistent. There are maybe, there's like matters of personal taste of like Sunshine is, but it's rare to have something that has been around since the 80s that hasn't at this point in 2019 absolutely fucked itself
2020.
at some point along the way.
Other than the Super Mario Bros.
Well, I don't think the new Super Mario Brothers are fucking it. They're just not as perfect.
They're just a little bland for
Yeah.
some reason.
Yeah.
But in this genre that became so big and able to become generic in because of Mario.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
And you know what's weird as well? I heard someone make this point the other day. Now Death Stranding's like, the movement is actually gameplay now. Like, it's crazy.
Right.
Mario is only movement.
Yeah.
Sure.
It's
Mario's
just-
a running simulator.
All
Yeah.
you do is move around in these worlds.
Yeah.
But they've made the movement feel perfect. So it's just innately fun to run around as Mario.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, there's a quote from when Ubisoft were developing the Mario Rabbids game, and they went to Nintendo and said, "We want to do this," and Miyamoto was like, "You can do it as long as you can't have any jumping in it, because that's a Mario platformer thing.
Right.
That's
Right.
the thing that defines those games is the jumping. So work out a system that doesn't involve him running and jumping.
Sure.
That's our thing.
Yeah.
Hands off."
Fuck.
Yeah, they're all great.
Yep.
They all deserve to be played.
Mm-hmm.
I think they're pretty much the most universal game. And they brought gaming to the masses. Speaking of gaming being brought to the masses, how about, Bert, we talk about the next trend of the decade that we thought worth mentioning? Mobile games.
And the kids are going crazy for it.
You've seen them on their lunchboxes. But what are mobile games? A plague and a blessing at the same time. It's like, because mobile phones pretty much happened this decade.
Sure.
Yeah.
The
This is
taking
our
off
Black
of the-
Mirror episode.
It's fucking nuts.
Well, the
Yeah.
smartphone.
The
happened
smartphone.
this decade.
Yeah, sure. What we think of as a phone now, I guess.
Yeah.
The internet in the way that it exists in our lives now.
Mm-hmm.
The with the smart device in the way that exists in our lives now. It happened last decade in the 2000s, but it really became what it is during this 2010s
Being on the internet
decade.
non-stop 24/7.
Yeah.
Having access to the fucking computer in your pocket.
Yes.
And it got monetized and Candy Crush started to exist.
Yes.
It was that sort of shit that is what you think of when you say mobile game, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Like
pretty
a-
much.
Candy Crush, Clash of Clans, whatever, some fucking thing sending you a notification being like, hey, it's been 40 minutes. Come build another campfire in your stupid fucking village.
Yes.
Uh,
Also, good things like Monument Valley,
right.
Yeah.
and like we talked about What the Golf recently.
So that's the other thing that it did is it gave this whole other avenue for a new type of control, a new type of game, this
Yes.
like mini, small kind of game that exists on mobile platforms, a portable way to play traditional games.
Yeah.
It's bizarre how just how much of a part of our lives it seems now, and that it really has been the last 10 years.
Yeah.
The all the microtransaction shit came out of this sort of thing.
Yep.
That like gotcha whatever thing,
Yep.
that was mobile games.
Yeah.
It is how this shit started happening.
Free games with in-game purchases.
Yeah.
That was it. That
What-
was how they got you.
What people see as like the negative casualization of games.
Yeah.
You know, games becoming mainstream with Candy Crush and like Farmville on Facebook.
Yes.
I guess was the previous decade. Bejeweled.
Which was a good... Like, these are not all bad games.
I played hundreds of levels of Candy Crush.
Yeah,
Same. Yeah.
And now have done it with like Dr. Mario and shit that Nintendo of all fucking people has, you know, come into after the fact and gone, oh, this shit's okay. Let's see if we can do our version.
Yeah.
So Mario Run, another one of the Mario games not included on our list.
Yep.
Yeah.
Because Mario Kart fucking mobile, whatever it's called.
Yes.
World Tour sucks.
Yeah.
I don't think any of Nintendo's handheld games have really been good.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, handheld. Fucking mobile.
Mobile. I don't mind Super Mario Run, but it's not included in that category that we did before.
I liked it, but yeah.
It's
Yeah.
good in that world of mobile games, right?
Sure.
But it is
Yeah,
this
yeah.
separate other thing.
Yeah.
It weirdly doesn't feel like video games in the same way. I like The Room. Those are
Yeah,
good
yeah.
games on mobile phones. Those like kind of point and click like room escape type games.
Yeah.
They live pretty well on a mobile phone.
Yep.
But other than them, there's nothing I don't think that I would choose or prefer to play on a mobile phone. And yet, it's the biggest gaming platform in the world.
Well, so then all this stuff kind of, to flip all that, a couple of years ago, Pokemon Go comes out
Yeah.
on the mobile phone,
Oh, yeah.
which is a weird, like forces people to go out into the real world
Yeah.
to play this mobile game. We're talking about that
Yeah.
in this
Yeah,
category,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
Right. Yeah, like probably you would say one of the biggest now, like currently, or certainly in the last couple of years, one of the biggest and most successful mobile games.
Games. Full stop.
Yeah.
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 But completely flips the script on what and it's got in-app purchases. Yeah, you can purchase like potions and all that sort of shit. Yeah.
Flappy Bird.
Yeah.
But like, Pokemon Go showing up is one of the biggest mainstream games. Fortnite and shit like that, which we'll talk about maybe more in detail a bit later, that is primarily played on the phone. In Japan, mobile phones are the biggest thing.
Yep.
Part of Konami fucking off from video games and all the shit that happened with Metal Gear that, again, we'll talk about later. It largely happened because they were making money on pachinko.
Yep.
But also no one wanted to make console games
Right.
for a period of time
The
because like,
overheads were too big. It just made more sense to do mobile games.
and no one's fucking playing them.
Yeah.
Like if people are just playing games on mobile phones and that's where the money is and that's where these whales are, you're
Yeah.
looking for the whales.
Yes.
When you're doing microtransactions, yeah, some people
Especially the
spend $4.
Japanese developers.
Oh god damn it! But there are people who spend thousands upon thousands of dollars on these mobile games. They're
Yeah.
a huge market.
Again, this is the gambling thing that we talked about
Yeah.
before. It is addiction. It is preying on and marketing to people's addictive personalities.
Yep.
And
Because it's there on you the whole time.
Yep.
24 hours a day is an opportunity to get people with these games.
It doesn't feel real. You're not putting a coin in a poker machine. You are just clicking a button and
Putting it in a bloody Pokemon Go machine.
oh, oh,
Ooh.
Woo-ha!
woo. But yeah, it's such a fucking shift of gears from what a video game was considered to be.
Absolutely,
in
yeah.
years past. They're completely mainstream now. Everyone who has a phone, I think, has played a mobile game at some point of
Yeah.
some kind.
Absolutely.
Which has expanded the pool of people who are technically, you know, gamers or whatever you want
To
call
100%.
it. Pretty much.
Yeah.
It's up there around that number. Maybe 104 somewhere or other.
Possibly.
But
I
it's-
played 2 games, so that probably counts for double.
it's nuts.
Yeah.
And it's changed what a game is to people, what a game is, what a company wants a game to be.
Mm-hmm.
And not necessarily for the positive, but it's definitely been one of the hugest things that's happened for the decade.
Yeah.
Which is why we've bloody talked about it.
Oh, is that why?
Yeah.
But I
Okay.
think, yeah, I mean, yeah, it definitely has done, you know, has contributed to the microtransaction thing, and there is a big negative side of it. But yeah, like, true, it has made it easier for, like, a lot of great stuff to come out to it. Like, Monument Valley is so good.
Yeah.
Such a great series of games.
There are some very good ones.
You just have to look pretty hard to find them.
Right.
And the auteur shit is harder to come by.
Well, and there's all these like kind of fake games almost that show
Yeah.
up on there. Your fucking like Grand Drive Automatics or whatever,
Right.
where it's like some
Lep.
fucking poorly made
Lep.
Lep.
Yeah, Lep.
Friend of the show, Lep.
Don't forget Lep too.
That
I think there are,
expansion.
how many Leps are there
There's
now?
a lot of Leps.
There's got to be a lot of Leps. Every Lep game is included in our Mario.
Yeah, Lep is actually is the best like microcosm of it.
But
It's
then-
a rip-off of an existing game with a weird little different skin applied to it.
Poorly made.
Poorly
I don't know
made.
who's playing it.
Yeah,
And yet they've made 50 of them.
yeah.
So they must be making money off of this
Someone's
somehow.
playing Lep.
Someone's fucking accidentally downloading this and going through it, or someone is 4 years old.
Yeah,
Is maybe more the
yes.
answer.
Yeah.
Who knows?
There's
but
3 Lep Worlds, then there's 2 Lep's World Plus, and then there's Lep World Z, which is
Ooh.
Lep crossed with zombies.
Oh, Plants vs Zombies, another huge one.
that one was okay, actually.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. But yes,
There-
one of the good ones.
And Apple Arcade is a pretty cool innovation in it. I think trying to sort of, I don't want to use the word legitimize, but traditionalize the types of games that you're getting on a mobile platform
Yeah.
is good. And I have nothing against, I actually don't really like using touchscreens to control games, but I have nothing against the concept of mobile games.
Yeah.
It's just that most of them aren't very good. You liked Sayonara Wild Hearts.
Yes.
I'm surprised that wasn't in your top 5 last week, as a matter of fact.
Yeah, I forgot about it, I guess.
Maybe because it's actually a bad game.
Oh! No, it's like a movie. It only goes for a couple hours.
Yeah, sure. But yeah, it's changed what a game can be. It's changed how easy it is to make a game and to get it in front of people, which is a good thing, I guess. But
Yep.
then you've got these weird stories. It's a brave new world we're living in.
Oh, yeah.
The classic idea of a game is gone, and a game can be anything, which I guess is ultimately a good thing.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, even though there were a million big budget traditional sort of games made in the last decade, and they're mainly what we're talking about as our big things. The sort of game where it's like a first-person shooter type of thing. Big budget,
Yeah.
pretty straightforward, linear type of game, but with a bit of a twist to make it cool. BioShock Infinite. That's the next one.
I may not always love you, but long as there are stars above you, you never need to doubt it. I'll make you so sure about it. God only knows what I'd be without you. Without you. And if you should ever leave me, though life would still go on, believe me, the world could show nothing to me. So what good would living do me? God only knows what I'd be without you. Without you. Without
Thanks, Mary.
This is rehearsals. This is not
Yeah,
going
yeah.
live to
When we
air.
turn the mics on, yeah, we'll do it real.
BioShock Infinite.
You can buy right now, Oh Shock Infinite. Welcome back to the shop.
A game that featured a bunch of people spruiking shit.
Yeah.
And is based on one of the biggest people spruiking shit events in history, the World's Fair, which
Right.
was a turn of the century fucking
Yeah, you read a book about this recently, right?
so interesting. But yeah, so BioShock Infinite.
What's the
it's
book, just quickly, if anyone wants to look it up?
The Devil in the White City.
Okay.
It's the history of the 1893 World's Fair and also a serial killer who was fucking around at the same time.
Is he the guy who had the hotel?
Yes.
Ah, Leo's going to be in this movie, right?
TV series apparently.
Nice.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's what BioShock Infinite is based on in terms of its setting and its aesthetic.
And that sort of like cartoon idea we have of America from about 100 years ago.
When America was creating those cartoons because it wanted to be seen as legitimate as Paris, as London,
Right.
as these other huge cultural metropolises.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, BioShock Infinite takes that exact idea, that aesthetic, that desire for America to be great.
Yeah. Which, again, is like,
It's-
was boiling at the time, but I think maybe it was a little ahead of its time, and it's like, oh, not even. It was definitely still happening at the time, but that like Randy kind of, as in Ayn Rand. That's what Austin Powers was always
Randy!
talking about. It was, are you Randy, baby? Do you love the free market? Yeah. Should a man be entitled to the sweat of his own brow, baby?
So BioShock, I guess we get to cheat and talk about BioShock as a series a little bit as well.
Sure.
Because BioShock Infinite is not altogether that different from BioShock 1 or 2.
Sure.
It's
Yep.
almost the same game, which was a criticism that it copped at the time. It's a lot of people thought it was the same as BioShock 1, but slightly worse.
Yeah.
Um,
I think I fall into that camp
Right.
a little bit.
but BioShock is an amazing game.
Exactly,
Yeah.
because it BioShock at the time was a big hit. As in, like, it did well. I mean for me. I don't mean in terms of money. I mean, like, it succeeded at what it was trying to do in a major way.
Absolutely, and it was a genuine work of art, a real sort of unique creation, a consistent sort of perspective
Yeah.
throughout it. Explored themes in a really artful way.
Except for maybe, like, the last boss fight, which was really strange.
Yes, I agree. I don't even know if I beat the last boss. I think I maybe watched it on YouTube.
Pretty dumb.
But anyway, yeah, so BioShock Infinite is all of that stuff that was in BioShock. It was exploration, tense first-person combat, and a really sort of strongly executed story
Yeah.
and world.
Yeah.
It also explores the same things almost as BioShock, which was like, what does society do to people? What do people do to society? And is that out of selfishness? Is it out of compassion? Almost exclusively, it's negative stuff.
Yeah. Very American shit of, like, capitalism, just like open capitalism. The most money is the best person.
Totally.
To the point where it, like, you know, it does some pretty on the nose type metaphors where it's like the founding fathers shit, all the like stuff that the Tea Party
Yes.
kind of people at the time were going like, I don't even know if that was at the time. I can't really remember. It must have been.
Surely, yeah.
But it's like revering this fake idea of who George Washington was, literally as a god in this in the game, and it pulled all that stuff off really well. The art design and the visuals of it were fucking beautiful.
Yeah.
The sound was amazing because it had all the time travel aspect to it.
Yeah.
And the way that it used more modern songs than from the 20s, but did those old-fashioned versions of them, created this really bizarre feeling world that put across its themes very well.
Yes.
The DLC for this was fucking good too.
The whole thing of the setting of BioShock Infinite was a separatist state.
Yeah.
It was people, and it's sort of like derived from the initial idea of America as Puritans who weren't allowed to be as religious as they wanted to be in England, going to a new world and creating that new world
Yeah.
as this perfect, pure Christian society.
And then that purity bleeds very directly into, hey, fuck other races.
Absolutely. And so that's what literally, that's what the United States of America was.
Yeah.
And then Bioshock Infinite shows a version of that is heightened, pardon the pun. 'Cause
You're in the sky.
you're in the sky,
It's
Thomas.
a city in the sky.
But it literally, it's a heightened version of what America actually is.
Yeah.
And it's like a great science fiction thing that shows genuine shitty things through a lens of wonder and
Yeah.
amazement.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Pulled off in a fun way. It was an enjoyable game too, and the DLCs for it, especially, I thought were a great wrap up to that whole kind of series.
Yeah, I think the DLC for Bioshock Infinite might be my favorite DLC of any game.
Agreed,
Because you get to go back to Rapture and Bioshock 1, and it looks beautiful.
the way that it wraps up. Oh, what's her name? Elizabeth's story.
Yes.
Is kind of heartbreaking.
Yeah.
But also really well done. The way both of those stories from the main game and the DLC end is great.
I remember at the time being just completely obsessed with how like maybe sophisticated. I certainly at the time thought it was sophisticated.
Yeah.
The story was told and structured and delivered in a video game.
The structure of it especially, I think, is really... Because when you come to a time travel anything, and like multiverse shit and all of that, it has all these big ramifications on, okay, so why did this happen? And why would this character have let this happen if they could travel in time and stop it?
Sure, yeah.
And I think it dealt with all that stuff pretty well.
And it does deal with it well structurally, and it's leading to an emotional resolution.
Yes.
Like the whole point of all that like structural fucking around, which is in so many bad time travel media.
Yeah.
But the point of it in this game was an emotional one and a personal one.
And it's exploring something that a number of games did around that time, which we'll talk about another one of them in the next part, but Walking Dead had this, and this had this, where it's like a father-daughter, or even father-son. We'll talk about another one in the next one. A lot of that parent-child relationship, which I think is kind of just something that the age of people who are involved with video games increasing as video games' age increases.
Yes.
My age, very high to be able to speak like this.
Yeah.
To have such good...
Your age and your IQ is about the same number, I think.
Hey, I'm 212 then.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I'm the smartest man who's ever lived. I invented all of these games.
Right.
Inventing game. I'm dumb as hell. But yeah, it's a really great game. It's another one of these ones that has that artistic vision and pulls it off. And yeah, I think is a great game.
I agree. That's why I asked for it to be on the list.
It very much did sit in that first-person shooter genre, though, I guess would be maybe a criticism you can make.
Right.
It wasn't like a sort of innovative genre piece.
Sure.
Didn't kind of create this new way of doing, say, a third-person action game.
Yeah, yeah.
Unlike a certain... Well, Demon Souls technically did it, but the next one is Dark Souls.
When did Demon Souls come out?
2009.
Right.
Yeah, so we just missed it. But Dark Souls and Bloodborne...
Yep.
And not Sekiro.
Sure.
But Dark Souls and Bloodborne in particular.
Sekiro is a minor work in the franchise.
As
Or
a
in
Dark Souls
yeah.
2 and maybe even 3.
Right.
But that original Dark Souls in particular, I think, is one of the most influential games of the decade.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
Also happens to be one of the best. It is one of my favorites ever, for sure. You guys have never really jumped into this series. Or
No.
Nah.
Yeah. Okay. So at the end of Nier Automata, you have... I think the influence of Dark Souls, at the very least, even if you haven't played any of them or don't care for them, can be seen across a lot of more recent games.
It gets brought up all the time.
All the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Especially with like indie stuff.
Yeah.
It's hugely influenced all of that, which I guess
Right.
we'll talk about in a minute.
Yeah.
But Dark Souls itself is basically Castlevania.
Right.
It's a 3D modernized version of that Castlevania type of thing of going through a complex location and having difficult combat.
Right.
That it is a sequel to that. It didn't invent anything. As much as it's been an influential thing, it didn't invent any of this stuff. I think some of the stuff that it did that was new and was influential was like the online stuff, having these little messages everywhere to kind of help you out. I think the community that built up around it online was a new thing as well, like on YouTube and shit like that.
Yep.
People talking about this game and discovering all the hidden shit in this game as it came out, that was new.
Right.
And that was a big 2010s thing of like, hey, we've got all this social media, we've got all these ways of interacting now, and here's a game that seems to be designed to take advantage of that because
Right.
like there's stuff in it where you're probably not going to fucking figure it out on your own in the way that those old NES games would have.
Yep.
Where it wanted you to either buy Nintendo Power type of magazines or the fucking strategy guides or call the hotline or talk to your friends about it
Yeah.
Yeah.
in real life. And
Interesting that that's way down the bottom of the list for you.
I called my friends for $2.95 a minute, and they helped me. But it's so well realized as this new version, kind of new version. It's a twist on a pretty classic genre. It's a third person kill everything in this environment type game, which is not new. But the specific implementation of it where it's like it's unflinching in what it demands of you,
Yes.
but the demands are pretty much fair.
Right.
It's difficult, but you don't you do level up your character during it, but you're more leveling up. I hate that term. But you're increasing your ability. You're getting better at this game
Right.
that has such a refined way of being played that you can be expected to become good at it.
Right.
Because it's well made. It's something that if you fuck up, you've fucked up. You don't fall through the fucking ground.
Yeah.
You don't. The timing on it is not so shitty that it doesn't really matter if you did it well or not because the game is against you. The game isn't against you. It's just set up in a difficult way that can be overcome.
Right.
Does that make sense?
I remember a huge trend of games just getting easier and easier and easier.
Yes.
I remember that happening throughout the first part of this decade. Just like literally there being no challenge to games.
Yeah.
You couldn't lose. It was all about getting you through it.
The
And
back
so,
half
yeah.
of the 2000s as well. It's so much hand-holding,
Yes.
which isn't a term you hear that much anymore. But it was a
Yeah.
big term, especially in like reviews and stuff, was hand-holding and like the whole game feeling like a long tutorial
Yep.
or just, no kind of challenge. And this went completely in the other direction to a way that I think really hit with a lot of people who were into those older style of game too, like the NES type of thing.
Yep.
It
Yes.
feels like what a modern game would be if the NES style of game had continued.
Right.
Does that
yeah.
make sense?
The
Yeah.
philosophy. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And then it's put into this really interesting, weird world with this dumb, strange story in the background that you kind of get by reading the item descriptions of things. Like it's not kind of in cutscenes for the most part. It looked fucking amazing at the time. It had this connected Metroid-y way of exploring the world, or Castlevania-y. But particularly, the thing that people harp on is the difficulty of it, but it's not the difficulty, it's the challenge.
Right.
And I know that sounds like, picking bones or whatever that fucking term is. What am I looking for?
Nitpicking?
hairs?
Nitpicking?
Oh, splitting hairs. Yeah.
Yeah,
Picking bones.
I got a bone to pick.
yeah, sure.
You got to stop splitting those hairs.
It's that it has a defined challenge, traditional kind of video game shit of learn the pattern of this boss, and it just asks you to do it.
Right.
It doesn't help you. It says, this is your challenge.
No looking at your phone, no looking out the window,
Right.
getting distracted. Play the game,
Yeah.
and you'll be able to play the game.
You've got all the tools here. You can absolutely do this. It's just on you to make that happen.
Well, like, difficulty implies that you could beat it through some manner of fluke.
Right,
as well,
exactly.
Which
Yeah,
challenge
yeah.
has to be overcome by just getting really good at it.
Yeah.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
And a couple of the bosses and shit aren't great in it, and towards the back end it sort of falls off of that. But the majority of the game it absolutely is that. It's fair.
Yeah.
And it's tough, but the feeling of satisfaction you get from being better than it
Yeah.
is really tangible. And then all the other stuff that it did with its visuals and like with the world being connected and with this unique way of creating that adventure of like the bonfires and this kind of online stuff, and it had these weird things where someone could invade your world and attack you and that sort of thing. It pushed that genre in a different direction to where it was heading, and in a satisfying way for a lot of people, I think.
Yeah.
So it's a big one.
And Bloodborne, same.
That whole kind of all of the From
Yeah.
games that are in there. Bloodborne again is
All of the good ones.
yeah.
Bloodborne
is a refinement of what it's doing and kind of a different take on it. And as is Sekiro, but Sekiro's like kind of weirdly different because it's more like about parrying, which I never really liked. I like to dodge in those ones.
Yes.
I love to dodge.
And it's a little easier. I think
Bloodborne is a little easier, maybe. Or they're all kind of up the same thing. Because and when it came, you're exactly right. When Dark Souls came out, it was at that tipping point of people being sick of how easy games were.
Yeah. I really vividly remember that happening.
Yeah.
And people being like, I always wanted to, like, or it's hard to say, like, because it would be young people as well, but people being very much like, this is a real game almost.
Well, because all these mobile games are showing up too, and all there was this
the casual
push.
revolution, the Wii, like all of that stuff happened. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then Dark Souls came along. It was like, hey, fuck you.
Yeah.
But you could say fuck you back to it. And it was like, you're cool. And if you had attitude, you got along with Dark Souls.
Yes.
And then that because as well at that time you were kind of only getting these kind of big games that were being put out. And you didn't have this huge selection of games that were coming out. There's this big, wide array of games being put out by big studios, sure, but also by the little guy. By maybe one person on their own.
Yeah.
Well,
how would you describe one person?
One person?
Yeah.
As being sort of indivisible because there's only one, which is where the name indie game comes from.
Yes. That is indie games.
Yeah, indie games kind of all happened in this decade as well. This is the last sort of thing we'll talk about for this part.
Yeah. I'm sure someone would debate us on that. I don't know where you can trace it really back to the beginning, but certainly in terms of like...
For Flash games are technically this.
Right.
Newgrounds
but in
is
terms
this.
of like being on people's radars to the same extent that, you quite often hear as much buzz about an indie game as you do about a major studio release.
Yep.
Untitled Goose Game being a good example,
Some of them are my favorites of all time, like The Witness.
Yeah.
Which Braid, which was Jonathan Blow who made The Witness, came out in 2008, I reckon. On the 360s.
Yeah, right.
And that was kind of, I remember, being the early, oh shit, here we go.
Yeah.
With this type of thing.
When did that movie come out, the indie game documentary? Because I remember watching that. I think that's like 2012 or something like that.
14 maybe. It was definitely after Fez, because it focused a lot on Phil Fish, who made
But Fez isn't out at the point that the film came out, I don't think.
Right. Fez was 2010 or 11. So...
Yeah, right. Well, anyway.
Who cares?
But
2012 indie game, the movie came out.
Yeah, right.
Right.
So it's simmering
Bang
for a little
on.
bit before that. But in terms of like, they're being I get as excited for a really great indie as I do for a major studio, sometimes more so.
And we've again kind of cheated because a lot of the games on the main list are like big budgety things.
Yeah.
And we're going to talk about, probably just by name checking, a whole bunch of indie games that have been great. Hollow Knight, for example, talking about Dark Souls,
Yeah.
owes a lot to that
Yep.
and is fucking great.
Such a great game.
So very good.
I think it might be the best example of a indie game and also of a Metroidvania. Like it kind of is, for the success that it's had and the way it gets talked about. It certainly, it could. It's in my personal list of the decade.
Right. It'd be, Inside would be in mine, and Firewatch as well.
Yeah.
Which is crazy that we're not really talking about them, but these big games also have more cultural big relevance, I guess, to how the decade played out. And a lot of the indie games are sort of interesting, but they're more of a side thing. They're not these like huge significant things that shape the decade, like a Minecraft. Oh wait, Minecraft is a fucking indie game.
Yeah.
It's one of the biggest games in the world, and it's an indie game.
What's the guy? What's his name?
Oh, Notch.
Notch, yes.
Who no longer works on the game.
And is a bad person?
Well, yeah, I was going to say evidently, but I guess evidence is maybe not the word to you, but it appears to be the case.
Right. Yeah.
But it's one person who spearheaded that game. I think there are other people working on it.
Yeah.
Undertale
Yes.
is one person
Yes.
who made that game, and it's...
Well, you talk about before with, Nier Automata and the kind of coming out of Japan, the very singular...
Coming out of Japan, and I've been feeling just fine.
The just like one person's vision. You get that so much in indie games.
Yes.
And I think it's very easy to get, I guess that, it kind of comes out of people maybe getting a bit fatigued on the idea of like a lot of big studio games starting to feel the same and become very, cookie cutter, and you then just get these smaller
Cookie clicker.
products. That,
Cookie clicker.
oh, cookie clicker.
Oh.
Oh, yeah.
I was telling someone about that the other day that doesn't play games,
Cut
and
to
it
you at,
sounded
like-
insane.
Cut to you at a restaurant, just like talking to a waiter, be like, "Get this," like just not even someone you know.
Yeah.
You're in an elevator, you push the stop button, and go, "Have you guys ever heard of Cookie Clicker?"
But yeah, just the being able to have a game be a bit cheaper as well, and
Yep.
not have to be like 50 hours. Have that like being able to set a different price point. Not much more to say. But
Doki Doki Literature Club, that was an indie game, right?
Yep.
And again, it's like, it's a short experience. It doesn't rely on big budget visuals and gameplay and stuff like that.
Yep.
It's just like, here's an idea. Experience this idea.
And we could almost do an entire decade recap on just indie games.
Absolutely.
There are so fucking many of them that it feels a little unfair to not kind of mention them all. Super Meat Boy. But they do occupy a separate space, even now.
Yes.
Even though they've become something that sits alongside all the kind of, in quotes, bigger games.
Well, what happens now quite often too is that like something launches digitally, it gets quite popular, and then it's been popular enough to get a physical release, and then it is in shops at a fuller price point alongside, studio games. So then the lines kind of really start to get blurred.
And I hope that it's not just me being susceptible to advertising and thinking that these, in quotes, bigger games are more significant because they have a bigger advertising budget behind them or whatever. But indie games and the relative ease with which you can make them, and then the way that the 360 first and then like Steam and all that sort of stuff have made them so easily obtainable and legitimize them by having them be accessible through the same means that you would buy a fucking Grand Theft Auto or whatever.
Yeah. And it feels like when you see something that's coming along that kind of appeals to you for whatever reason, be it aesthetics or it looks like an interesting game, and you get on board early, and then you start to see that it's doing really well, and it's like breaking all these records, and then it's going to be ported over to this and to that, and then it's getting a physical release. It feels good, like when you, when you really feel like you've got that sort of like almost like slight sense of ownership to it, where you're like really championing this. It's like easier to be like, fuck yeah, this like game made by 3 people is like getting all this coverage, and these like celebs are tweeting about it or whatever it is. No one's going like, fuck yeah, Rockstar made a lot of money on Grand Theft Auto Online.
Yeah.
It's like it's a feel good story when like Untitled Goose Game is getting all this press.
Well, it's like you got a small, British team of developers making this crazy ambitious game, and everyone's getting interested in it. It's getting reported on. People are like, "Wow, this is incredible! How are they even going to be able to do this? This is the most incredible game that's ever going to be made." And then it gets picked up by a big studio, and then it gets pushed out, and then they get death threats. And Sean Murray stole my game.
Yeah.
I mean, there's the intersection of indie games and mainstream publishers became a little weird towards the end of the decade.
Sure. No Man's Sky was an indie game, hey,
Yes.
I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
well, what? Yeah, I don't know. Was it?
What is an
still-
indie game even at this point? It would be great if that line got blurred even more. But there's still indie films and there's regular films.
Yes.
You know what I
Yeah,
think
yeah.
just the amount of production budget that something has, it influences the scale of it.
Yes.
And influences what they're able to do with it in the same way that it is for movies and for anything.
Yeah.
For buildings, for fucking anything. It is for games still. And they do, in my head, occupy a separate space for whatever reason.
Yeah. No, I agree with that.
But it's been fucking awesome, and some of the best games of the last decade have come out because the barrier to entry for making a game is lower than it's ever been.
And it's nice. Sometimes stuff just kind of syncs up perfectly where you've just played a big, massive game that's taken you like close to 100 hours or whatever.
Yeah.
And then the next thing that comes along is this like equally great, but way more easily digestible,
Yeah.
knock it out in a few hours little experience. Like I really like the way that sometimes like the year just, the way that works out is like dotted with these little kind of palate cleansers throughout the year.
Yeah.
You guys loved Firewatch.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Sure.
Again, a shame what a big studio has done to that. But yeah, Firewatch is a great one because, like, talk about a strong and unified aesthetic. Like, it was they hired this guy, this artist who I also already knew about, to do their aesthetic. It's just like that kind of thing doesn't seem to happen outside of indie games.
They are cool. I love Hollow Knight. I love The Witness. There's a bunch of others that I love. I don't know what it is that keeps them separate from me. I feel a bit bad about it, really, because I think it's my fault. But there's an enormous number of good, like ones that I didn't get so into, but like Dead Cells.
Sure, yeah.
100,000 other Dark Souls.
Hyperlight Drifter. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just, I mean, there's a million. There's
Yeah.
literally a million.
Yeah.
We could do a whole separate thing on them, and I don't know if we will, but it's worth shouting out that we understand that we are not necessarily addressing the indie elephant in the room.
Yes.
But we just did. So are you happy now, Elephant?
Yeah, you can't get us. You can't get us on a technicality.
Well, we better wrap up this part of our best of the decade. Guys, thanks for listening to the show. We hope you've enjoyed this part. We'll be back next week with part 2. You can get onto filthycasuals.com to find links to our premium Bandcamp episodes and also to our Patreon. And, we're really working our little rings off these last few days. So if you feel like chucking us a few shekels
Please.
for some bonus content, it'd be greatly appreciated.
Yes.
Until Dawn playthrough is still going up.
Yep. On the YouTube channel. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time. And as we say here at the end of every episode of Filthy Casuals,
Either you delete this podcast or nobody else can listen to it. I'm doing the end of Near Automata, but at the end of this one, if you delete it from your phone, I'll let other people. It will never work.
We don't want you to do that.
No, I'm going to delete it from. I'm hacking you right now, everyone listening.